was this idea of equality, taking race, gender, that we all have to consider race, gender, class, sexuality, ability. We all have to consider those things in terms of our politics if we're truly reaching for equality for all, and justice for all. That everybody in that sense should be linked into this tradition. But that politicizing of that identity to reclaim feminism as a space for a black political identity, however, was far more complicated and far more fraught with a certain kind of tension, right? And then, of course, when you have women, black women who identify as feminists, and are saying, right, I don't want to qualify, right? There's the flip side of that, saying, I am a feminist, right? And I'm trying to deny that history of feminism being seen as a white thing, right? There's a very politicized investment in that as well, to say, by saying, I'm a feminist, I don't have to qualify anything, right? It's also saying, I'm rejecting this idea that feminism somehow belongs to one group of people. That I have always, and I have a tradition to back it up, right? I have Maria Stewart, I have Anna Jewel Cooper, I have Sojourner Truth, I have Phyllis Wheatley, I have Ida B. Wells. I have these women to back me up to say this, in fact, is my tradition. So I don't need to qualify that, to say I'm committed to this, right? So there's a kind of three ways of thinking through black feminism as this intellectual, political, and activist tradition. Black feminists, once again, I say, as this very concrete kind of political identity that is moving and shifting and evolving. I think that's what's also important. This black feminism often tries to disrupt this idea of a wave. Like, I didn't wave. It was like high, low. I didn't really care about sexism then. Oh, I do again. No, not so much then, right? That's not an option. And that's not saying, and that's a critique also of feminism's own intellectual tradition too. That people continued acting. People continued moving and living and engaging in a world that was fraught with these kinds of tensions and these spaces of oppression. So that doesn't wave, right? That's an unwavering reality for a lot of these people. So that is a space of saying, we don't take that. We're saying we're part of this tradition that's ongoing and in multiple spaces, right? And it's also saying this women who identify as black feminists are going to reject the idea that feminism writ large is white, right? I mean, I've had this on a personal level conversation with family members all the time, like, why are you a feminist? And then any number of stereotypes about feminism come out, right? Whatever that means. What are the stereotypes we know about feminism?
Hate men.
Hate men. Lesbian, right, which is all trenched in so much lesbian baiting and homophobia that it's just ridiculous, right? What else is there?
Hairy legs.
Hairy legs.
Hairy everything.
Hairy everything, right? Just hair, right? We say hair. All right. We got man-hating, women-loving, hairy women-loving, man-hating, bitches, crazy, bra burners. I love that one because it's just so ahistorical. And I love that one though, right? So we're crazy, bra-burning, man-hating, women-loving, hairy-leg bitches, right? Not, you know, I mean, there's a lot there I actually wouldn't mind, right? That's so fun. It's funny to me, but it is thrown at us pejoratively for those who identify. So also is this history of this kind of divisive politics too, particularly for black women wanting and seeking to claim, and black people seeking to claim somewhere within a feminist tradition, right? Are you turning your back on these other more important issues, right? Do we have to ask the question of, does race trump gender when we make the decision, right? African American women were asked this kind of question at the turn of the century when the vote was up, right? Do we support black men getting the vote, or do we keep on pushing for all people getting the vote, right? But at that time, it was really like white women or black men, right? What do you do, right? What do you do, right? And the idea became in a lot of ways that there was this push, right, that eventually black men were enfranchised and then quickly disenfranchised. So
it came up during the election too, with
right,
Obama
and Hillary Clinton, right? We see this rehashing again, of course. And so this idea of what happens when you have those kinds of tensions, when you're asked to talk about two political identities that are facing very real oppression. They're very unique. And how do you match those two, right? Because you're experiencing it as a black woman. I don't walk down the street and say, I just experienced that as a black person, right? If someone were to call me or to walk down the street and say, you are a black bitch, which often it is, for some reason, that is racially marked, right, to walk down the street, right? Is it a racial slur? Is it a gender slur? What is it? Like, how do I incorporate that? Then how do I respond to that? Do I come to the Women's Center and talk about it? Do I go to the Multicultural Resource Center and talk about it? Do I go talk to Dr. Langley in Black Studies? Where does that belong? Black Cultural Center? I mean, there are a number of sites that we're talking about that address that, but imagine that kind of difficulty of thinking through that, right? Of what that means to now have to think of identity as this intersecting thing. That black bitch didn't just come to me because I was black or because I was a woman. It came to me as a black woman, right? As this whole being. It affects and implements and inculcates my entire life. Yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead. No. Please. As I said, this is a conversation, so feel free.
That just kind of reminds me, and I just want to share with everybody an experience that I had around the campus. It was really late at night, and I think this may have been the finals week in my half, but I really don't remember. But I used to live at University Village, right on Providence. And
Can you speak up just a little bit?
I'm sorry. I used to live at University Village right on Providence, and I was at the BCC until like maybe 2:30 in the morning. And because I had to get some work done, and I had my daughter with me, and I just, it was time for me to go home. I'm like, I have to go home. I can't stay here all night because I know I have to get up in the morning and get her ready and whatnot. But as I was walking home, it's campus. No one's there. I was right in front of the student center. I was walking past the student center, towards Providence, and it's this either black or blue pickup truck roll by with two white guys in it, and they say, "Carry that child, nigger." And I guess it just kind of really surprised me that people really think that that kind of stuff doesn't happen here on campus, but that just kind of made me think about that, so.
And what's embedded in a comment like that, right? Carry that child, nigga. Again, it's not just implicating race. It's not just implicating gender, right? That it speaks to a certain history of black women in relation to children, right? What their roles were, right, in terms of in slavery, right, as breeders, as perceived as hypersexual, as those who take care of everyone, right? We talk about the mammy a lot in terms of representations of womanhood. So, right, carry that child, right, and then that nigger, right, how nigger is seen as a term, right, and we think about that. So that, again, that slur, like, where do you go? How do I address that, right? What kind of hate crime is that? Right, even our law, which is why intersectionality becomes so interesting and comes out of legal studies, right, is because the law isn't fit to deal with that. Doesn't really deal with the fact that carry that child, nigga, right, is not one thing. It is multiple things, right? And black feminist scholarship, intellectual tradition, legal scholars, and there's some all over the place, activists, are pushing for us to think of a way to move beyond that. Not just the fact that there's racist comments or sexist comments, but that they're racist, sexist comments. They're racist, sexist, heterosexist comments, right? These things are embedded in one another, right? And rely upon one another to keep certain myths intact. And so to imagine that that happened here is certainly not far-fetched, right? But it is this idea that we now have to think about a history of where that comes from, how people think about that. Any questions about that one in particular? Move into the space. Yes.
So are you relating like black feminism to kind of like W.B. Du Bois' concept of double consciousness?
Well, I love that this group is so rich in that space and what we're citing. I'm not explicitly relating it to that. But interestingly enough, when we talk about something like double consciousness, which becomes really foundational in terms of how we think about black intellectual history and thought, that if you take anyone like Anna Julia Cooper, who was talking about being colored in a woman, and Maria Stewart in the early 19th century, talking similarly about a consciousness that must be aware of multiple identities at a similar time, that it is W. Du Bois that we remember for evoking or identifying double consciousness, right? So that's to say that the ideas of taking seriously that we move through this world as several things is not new. And in fact can be firmly located, I mean, we can also engage First Nation, indigenous populations to start thinking about the reality of that as well, right, in the United States. But in terms of kind of this idea of feminist thought, African American feminist thought, consciousness that is multiplied and not one fold firmly resides in Black feminist thought.